Elemental is the newest failure to be released by Pixar, both in terms of story and box office.
No way! No way!
This shouldn't surprise anyone, as Pixar has been making nothing but dog shit for the past few years. The first major fuck-up they had was Lightyear, where they chose not to recast Tim Allen for the role. Fuck knows why they chose to make that stupid decision. The second failure they released was Turning Red, which was just an allegory for how an underage girl should be allowed to whore herself out.
You know something? You disgust me.
That's not an exaggeration either, the film is a piece of shit. And the third failure they released was Strange Worlds, a film nobody watched because the only advert we saw about it was that it had a gay lead. Pixar has learnt nothing from these three mistakes and has decided to continue their losing streak by shitting out yet another turd with Elemental. This film is supposed to be a sort of Romeo and Juliet type of story, except the movie only takes place exclusively from Ember's perspective, making Wade a side character without much room for development, so he stays the same most of the movie. Now, because the writers have chosen to focus only on Ember, we end up with too little plot, so they have decided to pad it out with lots of retarded immigration allegory that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. They try several times throughout the movie to portray the other elements as racist against the fire people. The problem we run into, though, is that the reason why the other elements don't hang around with the fire people is because they are not fireproof and the buildings they live in will go up in flames. No matter how much Pixar tries to portray them as such, the other elements aren't racist for not wanting to be set on fire. The very proof that the other elements aren't racist are seen in the first 5 minutes of the movie. They welcome every element into the city as much as possible. It's why earth, water and wind all get along with each other. The real reason they don't hang around with the fire elements is because it's fucking fire, it kills everything it touches. So what are they supposed to do? Should the other elements burn to death just to prove they're not racists?
That's fucking stupid.
So because of purely practical reasons, the fire elements can't fit into the city, so they end up building a ghetto on the outskirts. Now, normally you would think that the relationship between Wade and Ember would help bridge the divide between the two communities.
Right? Wrong.
Now, I want to point out a certain scene over the halfway point in the movie. It's where Ember ends up meeting Wade's family, and his mother says that Ember's glassmaking skills are very useful, as most of the buildings in the city are made of glass. Well, it's here that I thought this is how they are going to integrate the fire elements into the city, where they can find jobs as construction workers. But this plot point is never mentioned again and quickly forgotten about. These two communities never come together, and the fire elements remain in their ghetto. Now, why did the writers choose to abandon this plot point, which they had clearly set up as a way for the fire elements to join the others in the city? My theory is that one or several people high up in Pixar clearly has a problem with the very idea of immigrants losing their victimhood status and successfully integrating into a society, especially if that society is based on America, like Element City clearly is. Because to these people, being a victim is way more important than trying to work hard and earn a good life. Another plot point that the writers set up only to forget about was with Ember's father being racist against water people. So naturally you would think that his character arc would be that he would eventually overcome his racism and see that he was wrong about water people, which he never does. The only thing he learned was that his daughter was being fucked by a water element behind his back. This would make any person who was racist only more so, but with her father, he seems to be okay with the fact that a water element continues to blow his load on his daughter's face, which makes no fucking sense, but whatever. There are so many half-forgotten plot points that they drop in this movie that it makes it feel almost incomplete. And the one part that is actually complete is the boring as fuck romance between the two dull characters. Speaking of which, the first boring character we have is Ember. Now, stop me if you've heard this before, but she is already amazing and perfect at everything she does. The only flaw she does have is that she has anger issues, but later on as the film progresses, this turns out not to be a weakness at all, but actually a strength. Now normally being unable to control your emotions is seen as a sign of immaturity, but no, not Ember, as the writers justify her bitch fits by saying her rage is just one part of herself trying to tell her what she really wants and that she should listen to it.
Sometimes when I lose my temper, I think it's just me trying to tell me something I'm not ready to hear.
This sounds like something a Sith would say.
Let the hate flow through you.
What kind of lesson is that? When you are pissed off and lashing out, that is when everybody should listen to you, as you are at your most reasonable.
Rage and vengeance, anger, they really clear the mind, so I'm good to go.
This is only here because the writers wanted to make an excuse for Ember's bad behaviour and didn't want her to have any actual flaws at all, as she is perfect. Now, to balance out just how amazing Ember is, we are then introduced to Wade, her polar opposite, who, you guessed it, is a weak, pathetic, crying loser who is unable to hold down a job for more than 2 days. He is incapable of controlling his emotions and is about as useful as a floppy cock. He is the butt of every joke in this film, which is convenient as the film only has one, which is, oh look, Wade is a crying loser, isn't that funny?
How about no?
Wade can barely be considered a man and has absolutely nothing for Ember to be attracted to. I don't care what you say, no woman finds a crying man attractive. For fuck's sake, she has more testosterone than he does and is more capable than he is. The only thing he does that Ember likes is to do what every pathetic man does, and that is to become a massive simp, complimenting her non-stop and making excuses for her bad behaviour. The only positive thing I will say about it is that the film looks nice and the animation is well done.
That's about it.
But for $200 million, it's got to do a lot more than look pretty, which it doesn't, and that is why, unsurprisingly, this has turned into a massive flop. The worst thing about this movie is that it's just boring to watch. Now I'm going to summarise this boring as fuck plot. The story starts with Ember's parents immigrating to the City of Elements, which has creatively been called Element City.
Christ, who wrote this?
Wow, these writers sure do have some imagination. So they are the first fire elements to arrive and are immediately granted asylum. They try to look for a place to stay, but are continuously rejected by everyone. As I said before, the film tries to portray this as the other elements being bigoted. When it's not, it's clearly common sense, as the people and buildings aren't fireproof. So with nowhere to stay, they find an abandoned building and occupy it, which her parents eventually build up into a convenience store. So before long, more fire people show up and the outskirts of Element City have turned into a ghetto. Fast forward years later, and we see Ember, who has since she was a child begged her father to inherit the store, and now that his health is failing and she is old enough, he finally has decided to give her a chance to do so. But on the big day she is being tested, she very quickly becomes angry and goes into the basement to have an emotional meltdown.
Women, know your limits.
She ends up breaking a pipe which releases Wade into her shop, and the very first thing he does is to immediately start crying about how much of a loser he is. So after he is done crying, he reveals to Ember that he is a city inspector and that he must report her dad's business for not having a permit for building the shop.
What the fuck are you talking about?
There's an entire fucking ghetto outside. How did this come to nobody's attention?
I don't know.
Anyway, Ember chases Wade throughout the city, but he manages to send the report to his boss, who will shut down her father's business in a week. Wade ends up feeling sorry for Ember and decides to help. Together, they manage to convince his boss that if they help find and repair a water leak, that she will forget about closing down her dad's business. Very quickly, they find the leak, which turns out to be a giant hole in a sealed door. Together, they patch the hole with sandbags, and Wade tells his boss to get somebody down to fix the hole. But he is then told that the construction crew refuses to do their job because they do not like Wade.
Well, that's just silly. Silly, yes. Idiotic, yes.
Now that's very stupid, but this is all a contrived reason for Wade and Ember to hang around again. Once more, Ember and Wade end up returning to the site where Ember uses her fire to turn the sandbags into glass that seals the breach.
Who gives a shit?
After this, they go on a boring date and Ember meets Wade's family. Wade goes on to give loads of compliments to Ember and this ends up making her panic. She drives all the way back home with Wade riding bitch on her scooter. This next scene is when her explosive temper becomes a strength, because why have any actual flaws when you can always be great? After arriving back at her dad's shop, she ends up having yet another temper tantrum until Wade points out that her insane emotional outbursts aren't a weakness, but is just some part of herself trying to tell her something she doesn't want to know. So Ember comes to the conclusion that after years of bugging her father to take over his shop, now that he is finally willing to give it to her, she no longer wants it. So this is Ember's entire character arc for this movie. She wanted her father's shop and now she doesn't. She is just a woman who can't make up her mind, and that sucks ass. If her father put that expectation on her, that at the very least would be something. But no, this entire movie is just her changing her mind about something nobody gives a fuck about. So after learning that Ember has a tendency to just change her mind about something she really cares about, Wade for some reason isn't deterred and asks her out.
You are stupid.
If she is willing to drop a lifelong dream that easily, then she is definitely going to drop Wade like a bag of shit at a later date. That is a guarantee. Ember ends up saying no to him, and sometime later, Ember's father prepares a ceremony for the entire fire community to witness him giving over his store to his daughter. Suddenly, Wade shows up and tells her father, the water racist, that he has been going out with Ember behind his back. Ember then decides that now is a good time to tell her father in front of the entire fire community that she doesn't want to inherit the shop.
But wait, there's more.
To make matters worse, Ember's mother reveals that she knew about the relationship the whole time and also has been lying to him.
You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. And now.
Just put yourself in Ember's dad's shoes for one moment. He has learned that his entire family has been deceiving him for God knows how long, and they have chosen to humiliate him by releasing this information in front of the entire fire community on a stage he paid for. It wouldn't surprise me at this point if he decided to go into the shop, turn on the gas, and waited till the building exploded. So after devastating her father with the multiple lies she has been telling, the glass Ember had used to seal the breach is destroyed. The problem with this is that earlier on, Wade's boss said that the glass didn't need to be fixed because it's as hard as steel.
Can't you see how retarded she is?
The real reason why she made such a retarded decision was that the writers needed a contrived reason for a giant flood to hit Firetown. This flood traps both Wade and Ember inside her father's shop, and with no way to escape, Ember eventually evaporates Wade.
Oh, thank God.
Unfortunately for us, this happy ending is cut short as Wade manages to cry himself back into existence.
That was so gay.
And so the movie ends with Wade and Ember going on a boat ride to fuck knows where.
I don't give a fuck.
And that's the end of Elemental.
It's a piece of shit.
My expectation going into this was already low, but somehow Pixar has managed to crater my opinion of their ability to make films. They haven't been the top of animation studios for a while now, and it's because they release shit like this. The only advice I would give the company is to get whoever the fuck is in charge of the studio, fire him or her, and then savagely beat them in front of the other employees for losing you so much money. This will serve as a warning for their successor. If the company takes my advice, I suspect very quickly shit movies like this will stop being made.